Yo, what's up everybody? Jumpin here, and today I'm going to be showing you guys my method for farming gold in Mass Effect Andromeda. And let me tell you, it's so much fun to do gold like this, and it's super easy. Now, the only downside to this, you're going to need a group of people to do it. I don't think you're going to be able to pull this off with randoms unless you can talk to the randoms and try to convince them to try this. But let me tell you, this works like a charm, and it's so much fun. Now, if you don't have any friends and you're playing by yourself, your best method is probably to make a Vanguard class that can melee. It's very popular right now, and it works. So if you're playing with randoms, yeah, go ahead and play with a melee class. But if you do have some friends, or you have a group of people to play with, try this method. You will not regret it. You will have a blast. Your friends will have a blast, and it's just epic as fuck. So what we're going to be doing is doing a ton of combos. I'm talking about we're going to be blowing everything up with all of these different combos. And it's actually very effective. It will stun the fuck out of the enemies. And because of the amount of combos that we're doing, it will actually damage the enemies and kill them. So it's pretty fucking ridiculous. Now, what I'm going to be showing you guys is I'm going to be showing you guys all of the classes that you can use to do this. And there's a lot of classes. So if you don't have some of these classes, it's not a big deal. But the one class that matters the most, in my personal opinion, is the Asari Adept. And if not her, then you can also use the Krogan Gladiator. The main thing here is you want Annihilation so that you can set up biotic explosions. And that's going to really play a big role in this. Because you're not only going to get biotic explosions, you're going to get tech explosions, you're going to get cryo explosions, you can get fire explosions, you can get all the explosions. But the biotic explosion is generally going to be the first explosion, and it's going to start this chain of explosions. So in my opinion, you definitely have to have the Asari Adept, otherwise it just will not work as well. Okay, and in this gameplay, I'm going to be playing the Asari Adept, which I made a build video for her already if you want to go and check that out. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to the top, and I'm just going to start talking about all of the different classes that you can use for this, and it will be extremely effective. Now I might skip a couple classes, so if you want to try something else, you can. But I'm just going to talk about the classes I know for a fact that are extremely good for this. The first one is going to be the Human Engineer. The Human Engineer gets Cryo Beam, Assault Turret, and Overload. Cryo Beam can debuff and set up cryo explosions. Assault Turret can be a distraction. And Overload can actually detonate all of the combos. And it can also set up tech combos. It's one of the only powers in the game. In fact, I think it's the only power in the game that just right away from the second you have Overload, it can set up a tech explosion and detonate any other explosion in the game. All other powers that can do that, for the most part, you have to choose that somewhere in their evolution. So Overload is amazing, and you definitely want multiple Overloads if you can actually get them. The next one is going to be the Human Sentinel. The Human Sentinel is actually extremely good. You have Throw, which is an amazing detonating power. Barricade, which can be useful for objectives or stopping the enemies from coming to you. And you can even set up Barricade so that it will constantly shock the enemies, and then it will set up tech explosions. So Barricade can be extremely overpowered if used right. And the final ability is Energy Drain, which if you set it up right can detonate explosions and also set up tech explosions. So the Human Sentinel is extremely good. Now if you want an Infiltrator, in my opinion, I think the Human Infiltrator is probably the best for this. The reason why is because you have the Cloak for objectives. I take that back what I said. I don't think she's the best for it, because I think the Asari Huntress is the best for it. But she is actually really good. So you have the Cloak for objectives. You have Incinerate, which is not the best power in the game, but it can detonate explosions and set explosions up. So it is pretty good. But the main thing that she gets, and a couple of the other characters will get, is she gets a debuff by shooting enemies. So if you're using something that will fire really quickly, like a machine gun or something, you will debuff those enemies by 24%, and it will help take out bosses and big enemies extremely quickly. So I definitely think that the Human Infiltrator is a really, really good class. The next one's going to be the Krogan Engineer. Now, if you guys don't know, the Krogan Engineer is actually the Human Engineer from Mass Effect 3. He has all the same powers. You have Overload, Assault Turret, and Incinerate. And Overload is fucking amazing. Assault Turret can play a distraction, and Incinerate can set up combos and also detonate combos. In fact, the Krogan Engineer is one of the only classes that has those kind of powers. In fact, I think the Krogan Engineer is the only one that does have that, where both of his main powers, Incinerate and Overload, can both set up an explosion and detonate explosions at the same time. So that's pretty fucking awesome. And I do like the Krogan Engineer a lot. I will probably do a build for him sometime soon. The next one's going to be the Asari Sentinel, which is good just like the Human Sentinel for the same reason. You have Throw, you have Energy Drain. Both powers are absolutely great. Now, I do think that the Krogan Mercenary has a lot of potential. Now, for this setup, is he the best? Probably not, but he does have a role if you want to play him. Flamethrower can set up fire explosions. It's really not something that you will see a lot, though. I will admit that. I've had people play him, and I don't really see the fire explosions coming up much. But it does do a lot of damage. Now, what he can do is use Fortify, and if you detonate Fortify, there's a perk that you can get that will set up explosions. And that's actually a really good perk when you're doing this strategy. We were playing with that, and it was working really well. But the last thing that the Krogan Mercenary gets, he also gets the debuff by shooting enemies. So that's extremely good. The next one is the Turian Havoc Trooper, which, in my opinion, is the best one of the classes that will actually get that debuff from shooting enemies. That's the main thing he's going to get. He will get that debuff if he shoots enemies. But the other thing that he gets is Incinerate, which can actually help with this strategy because it can detonate combos, it can set up a couple combos, and it gets Turbocharge, which Turbocharge is one of the best DPS powers in the game. There's no doubt about it. So the Turian Havoc is extremely good. The Solarian Infiltrator is also pretty good. He has Energy Drain, he has Cloak, so he can pretty much play a role for this team. But the best Infiltrator, I think, is the Asari Huntress. She has Throw, she has Lance, so she can detonate combos, and she also has Stealth Grid. Now, the only problem with Stealth Grid, if you're not playing on Host, it doesn't fucking work properly. They really need to fix that ASAP because that's a bunch of bullshit, and it shouldn't be a thing. But if you do need an Infiltrator, I think that she has a role to play because she can make everyone invisible, and she can make herself invisible, hopefully, if you're playing off Host, and you can do objectives, and it makes it a lot easier. Now, the next class that I'm going to bring up is going to be the Solarian Operative, which is one of the best classes for doing this. He has Overload. Right there, he's really good. He has Shield Boost, which is great for your team. That's fantastic. And he has Invasion, which is one of the best debuff powers in the entire game. So, he is perfect for this strategy. The only problem is he's ultra rare, and because he's ultra rare, a lot of people won't have him, and it's not a deal breaker. You can still do this strategy, absolutely, if you don't have the Solarian Operative. The main thing you need to have, at least one person, is the Asari, or maybe the Krogan, but I definitely recommend the Asari over the Krogan Gladiator. Now, the final class I will mention is the Human Kineticus. Now, I'm probably saying that all wrong, and you guys are all laughing at me, but that's fine, because fuck this class. Here's the deal. I think this class has a lot of potential, but right now, I really don't like her, although I don't even have her unlocked. If you guys don't know, what she does is that you can use your powers and drain your shield, so you can not have a recharge time. That's pretty dope. The problem is, they did not give her any type of really good setup power. She should have had Annihilation, and then she would have been the N7 Fury, and it would have been ridiculous. Now, the main thing that she can do really well is detonate a lot of combos. So if you want to do a combo team, she's actually not bad. She can just sit there and detonate a ton of combos for your team. But in my opinion, I don't really like her because I like the team to be set up around people that can both set up combos and detonate combos. That's why like Overload is so good and Incinerate can be very good. So that's the way I like to set the team up. But if you want to try her out, go ahead and try her out. I just don't really like her too much myself. Alrighty guys, well that's pretty much it for all of the classes that I would recommend trying for this setup. Now I'm going to go ahead and show you guys the gameplay, and let me tell you, it's going to be ridiculous. Alrighty guys, well this is going to be the gameplay, and we're just going to start by blowing shit up. Like, we ain't bullshitting here, right? We are going to blow everything the fuck up with all these amazing combos, which the damage of these combos, they might suck, but when you do this, you have to understand something. What we're going for here is quantity over quality. Now, of course, I still think the combos are pretty weak. But when you get a fucking biotic, cryo, tech burst, and you do it so quickly, the damage starts to add up. And of course, the whole time you're shooting the enemies, doing damage with your gun, it's stunning the fuck out of everything. This strategy works like a charm. And the main thing about it, it's so much fun to do this strategy, guys. It's so much fucking fun, and it looks epic as fuck. So once you start doing it, you start to have so much fun with it that you can sit here for hours and you don't even like feel like you're sitting in a room, because I mean really we are kind of camping, sitting in a room and stuff, but you really don't feel that way because there's so much shit always going on and it's distracting you, and you do have to do objectives and stuff, which I will actually help you guys and talk about that as well. Now if you're gonna do this, you need to pick a map that's going to have pretty much just a couple ways in. Like this map is perfect, fire-based magma. If you stay in this room, there's only 2 ways in this room, and if you fight out on this ramp area, you can also fight here if you want, but for the most part you want to stick into this one room, and when they come in the back side of the room, you blow them up. If they come in the front side of the room, you blow them up, and that's pretty much it. And it will fuck the enemies. You will destroy them by doing this strategy, and they should build up in the doorways, and it just allows you to do so many explosions. Now another thing that I would recommend is you want to block the spawn in the beginning, and that's for all maps. Every map's gonna have a bad spawn, and especially if you're gonna hold up in one area, you don't want them spawning in certain positions. Like for example, this berserker here, he spawned on the bottom and he ran up and he came up behind us, and by coming up behind us, that can fuck you, because you don't realize he's there, and then by the time you do and you start to try to take him out, it's too late. Everything's coming through one doorway and you're like, fuck dude, we're getting surrounded. It can fuck you. So if you can block the bottom spawn on this map, it's really good. Now I will point out in this video where you want to go for that when I see it, but right now just understand that it's going to be in that little room at the bottom area where the ramp is and the ammo box, but it's not in that room. You want to stand a little bit outside of that room to block that spawn in the room and the spawn immediately outside of that room, because anything that spawns in that area will probably go up that ramp to try to get you, where if they spawn anywhere else, they'll probably go to the front door, and a couple of them will go in the back. That's gonna happen no matter what you do, but it's not gonna be like 50 enemies just immediately spawn there and it will get you pinched and fucked, because you don't want that to happen. Now for this gameplay, our team is going to be the Asari Adept, which is probably the most important person, at least somebody with Annihilation Field. That's going to set up all your biotic explosions, and that's pretty much it when it comes to setting up those explosions. You really just need Annihilation Field, and it's going to set up tons of biotic explosions. Now besides that, the other classes are going to be kind of like support classes, but they're also going to be able to set up a bunch of explosions and detonate a bunch of explosions. Now if you want the dream team, the absolute best team for this is going to be the Salarian Operative, the Human Engineer, and after that I would say probably the Turian Havoc. Now the reason I bring him up, he's not the best detonator and he's not the best setter upper. He's not. But he does have a lot of other good things. Like when it comes to killing things with weapons, Turbocharge will make that fucking easy as hell. Like the DPS you can get off a Turbocharge is fucking awesome. Besides that, he also gets Incinerate, which can help with this strategy because he can detonate combos and he can set up fire explosions. But the main reason why he's good, and a couple other classes like the Krogan Mercenary is good, is because he gets a debuff. So with the Asari, you get a 40% defense debuff with her if they enter the Annihilation Field. With the Salarian Operative, you can get a 25% debuff or a 35% debuff with Evasion, depending on how you have it set up. And with the Turian, if he shoots an enemy, you can stack up a 24% debuff to that enemy. So if you're talking about a boss here, he's gonna take a lot of fucking extra damage if you combine all of these debuffs together. Plus, with the Human Engineer, you can get a 50% armor debuff with the Cryo Beam. So it's pretty fucking crazy. So your dream team is the Asari Adept, the Salarian Operative, the Human Engineer, and the final one would probably be the Turian Havoc. If not him, the Asari Infiltrator, the Asari Huntress, is actually pretty fucking good. She's also really good for this because she's an infiltrator. She can do objectives like devices. She also has throw for detonating combos. I think she is fantastic. But my team right here is a Human Engineer, a Human Sentinel, and also a Krogan Engineer. Now the Krogan Engineer is great because he has Incinerate and Overload, But the main power you want here is Overload. Overload is fantastic, especially combined with Annihilation Field. Annihilation Field can set up the biotic explosion, and then the person with Overload can detonate that explosion. And then after that, immediately you can go ahead and throw out Throw or Lance or whatever power, and you will get a Tech Explosion. Overload can actually set up an explosion and detonate an explosion. So that's really fucking awesome. And you'll notice that if you start to combine Overload with the Asari Adept, is that they can detonate my biotic explosion and I can detonate their tech burst. And when you do that, it's fucking crazy. On top of that, you can actually get a cryo explosion and you can get a biotic explosion at the exact same time. You can get a double explosion. I'm pretty sure I've seen that as well with tech burst, but not so much with the fire explosions. I think the fire explosions are kind of weak in this game. Now what they do is when you get them, they'll do damage over time, which is pretty cool. But I just don't see the fire explosion combo pop up that much. Now I haven't played with Flamethrower and I haven't played with Incinerate, so I can't really tell you if you're actually getting the combo or not, especially when you're doing a strategy like this. But from what I've seen playing as the Asari, I just don't see it pop up much. I see Tech Burst pop up all the time. I see Cryo Explosion pop up all the time. Now another thing I would recommend trying with this is use Cryo Ammo. Because of what I said earlier, which is true, you can actually get a Cryo Explosion and a Biotic Explosion at the exact same time. So for example, what you can do, if you have Cryo Ammo and you're playing the Asari, you can actually shoot them and freeze them, and then when you go to detonate them, it will pop up and say that you got a cryo explosion and a biotic explosion, and it's fucking crazy. And the amount of damage you get is from both of the explosions, so you will fucking wreck shit. Same with berserkers and other armored targets. It's really, really awesome, guys. So your dream team, like I said, is going to be the Asari, the Salarian Operative, the Human Engineer, and then anyone else after that is fine. But those guys are your main members of the dream team. But I would recommend maybe the Turning Havoc for the debuff. But if you don't have him, or if you don't know anyone who wants to play him, then you can play the Human Sentinel, the Asari Sentinel. Pretty much anything that can also do combos is fine as well. I think the Krogan Engineer is fantastic. I would also recommend him a lot. The turret actually has a lot of potential. Now, right now, I've heard the cryo on the turret is bugged, and I don't even know what that means, but I do think that it has a lot of potential. And on top of that, the flamethrower can set up fire explosions, but I don't really know. Most people don't really want to go for the turret, and it really is not something that will make or break this setup. Like, you don't really need the turret. The turret is more of a distraction than anything else. And in fact, when you're doing this, I highly recommend always having the Human Engineer if possible and throwing the turret out into the opposite doorway. So if they're coming from the front, then you want to throw it out in the back so that all the enemies will get distracted on that and they won't come into the room to kill you. You will notice a lot of dogs and enemies will actually stop to mess with that turret, and it's actually really good for that, if anything. Now, one thing I would recommend doing is try to communicate with your team at all times. When they're coming in the front, we say, oh, they're coming in the front. If they're coming in the back, we say, oh, there's a Krogan in the back. And we communicate, obviously, because we're trying to work together and do all these epic explosions and shit. So that's what we're doing. But let me go ahead and talk about objective waves right now, because this is also important for farming gold. Now, if you have an infiltrator of some sort, either a Salarian with energy drain, which can be actually good for this, or the Asari Huntress with the stealth grid and also throw for detonating, she's also really good. Then you don't really need to worry about certain things like devices. Your best strategy is to just stay in the room, lure all the enemies into that room if possible, and then pretty much let your infiltrator go and get all the devices on their own, because they can sneak around the map with the cloak, and most of the enemies will be coming to the room where all the players are. So that is something you can do to make devices really easy. Targets, you should just let the targets come to the room. Now, if you need to go and get the target, if it's like some bullshit ass sniper or something, you can always go and get that target real quick and come back. But for the most part, you should be able to stay in the room and complete the target objective no problem. Now, if you get a hack, honestly, hacks are pretty fucking easy. You just need to stand in the circle and then that's it. Sometimes it can be somewhat hard because of the location, but for the most part, the hacks are pretty easy. And the uploads are also kind of easy sometimes. Now, of course, they're one of the worst objectives in the game. There's no doubt about it. And there's a lot of annoying things about it. But you can actually get it done fairly easily if you find the easiest one and you do it first. And this is why I say this, okay? One of the big things that I've discovered when playing gold that makes it so much easier to do the objectives. Understand that in any given wave, only some of the big enemies are gonna spawn. So if you're playing against, let's say, outlaws, only 2 berserkers or krogans will spawn and 1 hydra. That's it. They will not respawn. Okay, so it's not going to be like 5 fucking krogans and 2 hydras. It ain't going to happen. So your best strategy for doing the objective is just simply killing those big enemies first. So if you have an upload, if you have a really easy one, go into the easy one and kill those enemies. If they're all hard, then go ahead and stay in this room for a little bit. Wait for the krogan to come, like we're doing now. We have devices, okay? And what we're going to do is we're going to let the krogans and the hydra come, and we're going to kill them first. That way, when we go to get the devices, we don't actually have to worry about these bastards, okay? They're not going to do anything because they're not going to respawn. And they are really, really, really fucking annoying when you're getting a device to have a krogan on you, because they'll keep stunning you off of it. So I highly recommend, if you're doing the objective, kill the big enemies first. They will not respawn, and then you can make it so easy to get the objective. Now for devices, if you have a human sentinel, the human sentinel is actually pretty good because of barricade. So what Pumpkin's going to do here, she's going to go and try to get the devices on her own, and we're going to hold up in this room and try to lure the enemies to us and hope that we can do it. Now unfortunately, if you don't have cloak, there's a pretty high chance that enemies are going to get on her and we're going to have to go and help her. But that's really not a big problem. I mean, that's what we should be doing anyway. But barricade's actually really nice for objectives, especially devices. You can put the barricade out behind you, and then you can get the device and pretty much stay behind the cover. It's really fucking epic. But that is something you can do if you do not have an infiltrator. Because for the most part, I don't really recommend an infiltrator for this setup. If you want to go for maximum debuff or maximum explosion, you probably won't have an infiltrator. But you also don't really need an infiltrator, because all the objectives are really not that difficult to do. And honestly, I think the hardest one is probably the devices. And that's only because sometimes the enemies can just get on you really hard, and it can be very, very annoying to deal with that. Because if your teammates come over to help you, then you're going to guarantee that all of the enemies are going to 100% come over to that device and fuck you in the ass. And you do not want that. So you definitely want to try to spread out. If you're going to help your teammate, try to spread out. Try to move around the map a little bit. Which, right here, you're going to see a lot of running and gunning from me. Which is something you haven't seen throughout the gameplay, because I've been kind of holding up in the room, doing explosions. But this build is great at running and gunning, and it's a lot of fun. And this is a great example of running and gunning on gold, and how you kind of want to go about doing it and moving around and actually shooting enemies and just finding cover and doing all types of awesome shit. But yes, you can run and gun with this build, absolutely, and you're gonna see it right here a little bit. So I'm pretty happy I decided to leave this part in, because at first I was thinking about cutting it because it's kind of a long wave, and that's just because it's devices. If you ever get devices, it's always gonna be a fucking pain in the ass. There's no doubt about that. Alrighty, so I've already been over what is the dream team, because there is some members of this team that are better than others. There's no doubt about it. But for the most part, if you just go off of my guide in the beginning, any of those classes are acceptable for this strategy, because they can all do explosions. They can either set up explosions or detonate and set up. So all those classes are really good. So if you don't have certain ones, it's not a big deal. You should have some of the humans. Obviously, they're common classes. Now, of course, it's even better if you can actually max out those classes. So I still would recommend trying to max out your early classes, your uncommon classes, and your common ones to 10. It's really easy to get the human common classes up to 10 if you're using like a human engineer or something. If you're going to play him, it's really easy to get that card up to 10, because if you're farming gold like this and you're getting multiple games in, you're getting so much money, you can buy so many packs. You can also get a lot of equipment too, which is nice. Because sometimes, yes, you should rock it, and sometimes you need a Medigel, and sometimes you should first aid and use your ammo packs and all that type of good stuff. You should not be sitting there being stingy about it, like especially if you know it's going to help. And that's always the best time to use your rocket, is when you're in a situation and you feel like you're going to get totally fucking dominated and pinched. Like if there's a Hydra coming in the room and there's already 2 Krogans in the room with you and you're having trouble killing them for whatever reason, just rocket the shit, get it over with. You don't want to sit there and have everybody die and have a billion enemies come into the room and fucking destroy you. So that's your best time to rocket. But most of the time, if you kind of are communicating and you're pretty much setting up properly, you really shouldn't have an issue with dealing with the enemies before they get into the room. You'll see it in the gameplay a lot of times. The Krogans are going to try to come into the room, and then they get totally fucked. I mean, they get destroyed. Unfortunately, they have a weird glitch. These berserkers can like just glitch through walls and shit. And that shit's wild. Like, it's really fucking wild when that happens, but it does happen a lot. And right there, I used the rocket. Why? Because there's two fucking Hydras. There's no way we're going to kill both Hydras before they get into the room. And I don't want them in the room because it's going to make it a lot harder to deal with other enemies like berserkers, which is what you really want to deal with. And this is the extraction wave, and we're pretty much just chilling in this room. I mean, that's what you can do the entire match. And for most objectives, you can chill in the room. If it's a target, chill in the room. Now, if it's a hack, you got to go out of the room potentially, but a lot of times the hack might be in the fucking room. Uploads too, you're like, fuck, okay, well the uploads are in the room. That's fucking great. And the main thing with the objectives, just remember, kill the big enemies first. Kill these berserkers, kill the fucking Hydra, and it's just gonna make it so much easier for you to deal with the objective once those enemies are dead, because those are the problem enemies. Just remember, guys, one of the big things too, you also want to block the spawn at the beginning of every wave. That really does help a lot. But as you can see, the amount of explosions that we are getting is just out of this fucking world. It's a lot of fun to play like this. There's no doubt about it. It's super easy to farm gold. And yeah, I mean, that's pretty much everything I wanted to talk about when it comes to gameplay. Alrighty guys, well that's gonna pretty much do it for the gameplay. I really hope you have enjoyed this, and I really do hope that it has helped. If it has, will you please like the video for me? Be sure to subscribe for future videos, and I really do hope that everyone has a very nice day, and peace. So
yes, you can! Just do it! If you're tired of starting over, stop giving up.